Hello guys, this is Pearl and today I am super overly excited to give you a tutorial on some of the things you need to consider when choosing a domain name for your website, your blog, or whatever you want to choose a domain name for. I'm going to give you 7 solid tips you can consider when choosing a domain name. So let's get more into this. The first tip I have for you when choosing the right domain name is that 1, make sure that you choose the right extension. The right extension is very important. Now we have lots and lots of extensions you can use. We have .com, .org, .net, .co. We have lots of extensions you can use, but it is very important to stick to an extension that is very common and very popular. I would advise you to stick to .com because .com is everywhere, universally accepted, universally used, and people relate to .com better. So instead of you to consider other extensions like .net, .org, .co, first think of .com before any other thing else. That is very important to get a right extension to choose or to use. Now let's look at the second tip you need to consider when choosing your domain name. Number 2 is to think of long-term instead of short-term. It is very wrong to think of something or a domain name you can use for the time being and later on changing it. This doesn't work that way, or it doesn't work that way, or it will make people think that what is the difference between the first one and the second one, and you don't want your online audience to think. So whenever you are choosing a domain name, think about a long term. Now, if you decide to think about a short-term domain name to use for the time being, and later on in future you decide to change your domain name, it is going to cost you money, it's going to cost you SEO ranking, and it's even going to cost you branding. So why don't you just choose a domain name that you can stick to forever or for a very long time, which won't cost you any additions? It is always very important to choose a domain name and also think about the future when choosing that domain name. Let's move on to the third tip. Number 3 is to include keywords or a niche. Now, when choosing a domain name, always include a keyword that is easily identifiable with your brand or with your business, because this will make more sense to your customers. So for instance, if you are a company or organization that helps people to build websites, you can easily choose a keyword like websitecreations.com or websitebuilders.com. These are keywords you can use, and it helps people relate more to your brand, and it doesn't create confusion at all. Now, one most important thing about keywords is that when you use a keyword that most people use when searching for your product or services, it is going to help you increase your search engine, and most importantly, it's going to drive traffic to your website. So you are winning a lot of things just by doing one thing right. So always include keywords or a niche when you are choosing your domain name. Now let's move on to the 4th tip. The 4th tip to consider when choosing your domain name is that your domain name should remain unique and brandable. Now, your domain name is the face of your organization or your business, but just that this time around, it is in the form of a URL. So your domain name must remain brandable. Your domain name must actually sound like a brand. And that is how you can keep your domain name unique and brandable. Now, staying on brand or staying unique when choosing your domain name mostly is built on, or is mostly centered on, choosing a domain name that accurately reflects your business, and also that is easy to memorize and also very catchy for people to easily relate to. It is very important to keep you unique and brandable. Now, another thing is that do not choose domain names that are complicated or that sounds so unnatural. This is very bad. It's a bad thing to do. Examples of great domain name that helps the business stay brandable and unique is Amazon.com, Betway.com, and Pepsi.com. These are great domain names you can choose or you can use as an example when choosing your own domain name. Tip number 5 when choosing a domain name for your business, your blog, or for your website is that keep it simple and short. Very important point. Always keep your domain name simple and short. Now, when you make your domain name long and complex, you risk web users mistyping your domain name or misspelling it, and you don't want that. So always keep your domain name very simple and short. That is always the best. Don't try to put a lot of words into one as your domain name. You will always not do well with such long domain names. Now, great examples of simple and short domain names are udemy.com and also youtube.com. These are two great examples you can use or you can consider when you are trying to choose a domain name for your business that is very simple, straight to the point, and also easily identifiable with. Let's move on to the next one. The next tip to consider when choosing your domain name is to make sure that your domain name is very easy to type and pronounce. Now, one thing you need to consider is that when your domain name or when nobody can pronounce your domain name or even type it as a URL, then your traffic numbers suffers the result. Apart from the fact that your traffic numbers might suffer the result, if your domain name is very confusing, it's not very friendly to the web users or whoever who is typing it, they are going to be lost when trying to find your website or your blog, and they might even end up somewhere else which you might not like. So it is very, very important to choose a domain name that is very simple, short, easy to relate to, and you are good to go. The seventh and the last tip I have for you when choosing your domain name is that you need to avoid numbers and hyphens. Numbers and hyphens are a no when you're choosing a domain name, because remember we said that your domain name must be easy to spell and pronounce, and hyphens and numbers get in the way. Hyphens and numbers makes it even more difficult for your domain name to be pronounced. Imagine you have a domain name with numbers. How is it going to be pronounced? Even with hyphens, it makes things difficult for people or your customers to type in your domain name. So to avoid all these, just avoid numbers and also hyphens. Just keep your domain name simple, and it must be punchy and just straight to the point. Okay, people, thank you for sticking with me from the beginning to the end. I am very certain you've learned something for today. If you have, you know what to do at this point. All you have to do is to click on the subscribe button right below, and I will always come your way with more educative and interesting content for you to learn something new. Thank you for subscribing, and I will see you in the next tutorial.